All right. So let me just start out with a little trivia here. How many, for those of you who are musicians of sort, how many musical notes are there? Like for us here in the West, how many musical notes? Anyone know the answer to that? 8. What about like the flats and the sharps and all that stuff? Are you close? 12. Not 30. Boom! Lauren. Oh, nice. Working together. Okay, yes, there's 8, but then you got the flats and the sharps and everything. So there's 12 notes in the music that we hear. So that means every song that you know, that you like or that you hate is based upon just 12 notes. Or limited, they're based upon at no more than 12 notes. Okay? And it's crazy when you think about how many songs there are. There are tens of millions of songs, just like in Spotify alone. Tens of millions of songs. And those are just the ones that are recorded, right? So it's crazy to me that every song we sang this morning, that you hum in your head, the ones, again, that you love, that you hate, everything from, screaming metal to hip-hop to jazz to K-pop, country, classical, folk, rock, punk, R&B, every genre is all based upon just 12 notes being used in a different kind of way. Isn't that wild? It seems like there's this endless variety of just the same basic ingredients, which is just 12 musical notes. I think that's crazy, and there's a lot that could be talked about with that. But I think about that kind of thing when it comes to the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Hear me out on this, okay? Because Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the first 4 books of the New Testament in our Bible, these guys all had the same 12 notes to work with, namely the life of Jesus Christ, the life of Jesus of Nazareth. They had the same 12 notes, but yet the more that you listen to these guys, that you listen to what they wrote, the more the differences start to come out. None of them are identical. For instance, Matthew, he views Jesus through the eyes of a Jewish tax collector. And so when you read through Matthew, you're going to get all kinds of Old Testament references. And if you don't know anything about the Old Testament, you're going to be like, I don't get it. I don't understand what are all these nuances and all of these connections. But Jews who are reading or listening to Matthew would be like, this makes a lot of sense. This is actually really catchy. I like this beat. I like this melody. This makes sense of everything that I know. Matthew brings that out. Luke, he's a doctor, and he's writing from a Gentile perspective. And when you read through Luke, this is orderly. Everything is it's very clean, detailed, thorough, kind of what you would expect from a doctor, right? And you would get through Luke, and you'd be like, man, I feel like I've heard it all. This is the complete story. What else could there possibly be? It's so thorough and complete and orderly. But then you get to John. And I don't know if you know this, 90% of what John includes in his gospel is not even in Matthew, Mark, or Luke. 90% of what John talks about is completely unique to John. And then at the very end of John's gospel account, he says this. He says, there's so many other things Jesus did, and if every one of them were written down, the world itself wouldn't be able to contain the books that would be written. Crazy. So Mark, on the other hand, Mark was written to the Romans. And Mark, he doesn't even try to impress you with Jewish history and pedigree, lineage of stuff. It's Mark using, though, the same 12 notes that are available to him, the life, the death, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Mark uses that, and he writes a gospel that is completely unique. It's in its own genre. And so if you've ever wondered, if you've read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, have you ever wondered why the gospel accounts are just different? Well, it's because the writers are different. They're different guys, and they're all writing from a different perspective. Again, they're using the same material, but they are crafting it in such a way to show Jesus in a certain light. And then it becomes a very unique thing. Think about how many of us, if, let's just say, Roman earlier was rocking out during worship and he fell off the stage, and we're like, okay, what the heck happened? And we asked everybody, what did you see? What did you see? What did you see? One event, but I guarantee there's going to be probably different perspectives. I was over here. He was rocking out. I mean, he tried to do this thing where he spins the guitar around or something, and he fell off. And over here, I was on my phone. I didn't see it. This person over. I mean, there's going to be different perspectives, right? And so when we come to the Gospels, these are different perspectives. These are not conflicting accounts or contradictory accounts, I should say. It's 4 different perspectives on the person, the work of Jesus Christ. And so that gives us a good reason to get to know this guy, Mark, who wrote the Gospel of Mark. And so what I want to do today is just introduce us to Mark. And today's just really a zoomed out flyover and then of the Gospel of Mark. And next week, we're actually going to get into the text, start working our way through it. But let's talk about who Mark is. Who is this guy? We get to know the author. We get to know Mark back in Acts 12. Acts 12, it tells the story of, if you remember when we were going through Acts, that Peter was put in jail, and he was most likely going to be executed. So he's in prison. It's nighttime. He's sleeping, and all of a sudden an angel wakes him up, and there's a miraculous jailbreak. This angel rescues Peter out of jail. And in Acts 12, pick up the story here in verse 11. Peter finally came to his senses. Probably thought it was a dream or something. And he says, "It's really true. The Lord has sent an angel and saved me from Herod and from what the Jewish leaders had planned to do to me." And when he realized this, he went to the home of Mary, the mother of John Mark, where many were gathered for prayer. So this guy, John Mark, he's our guy. Some translations say John, who they called Mark. This is the author, Mark, of the Gospel of Mark. So what do we know about him? Well, we know that he lived with his mom. Don't know much about his dad or anything at all. He lived with his mom, and he's probably a fairly young guy at this point in Acts 12. And just think about, notice where his home was. His home in Jerusalem was kind of the rallying point for the church at the time. This is where a lot of prayer meetings happened, where people would come. This is where the church was gathered while Peter was in jail. So I would imagine he's raised with just this expectancy of God's moving. He's eavesdropping in on all these conversations that are happening. He's participating in conversations with think of all the people that would have come into his house as the rallying point. And he's really got a front row seat to all that God is doing. And so much of it's happening in his living room. So you got to think he's soaking this in. Okay, later on in that same chapter, we see that Mark gets to go on the road. Yeah, he gets to go with Paul and Barnabas, Acts 12. Meanwhile, the word of God continued to spread. This is verse 24. And there were many new believers. When Barnabas and Saul had finished their mission to Jerusalem, they returned, taking John Mark with them. So they take Mark on this next missionary journey. He was kind of an assistant. And I gotta think that's a pretty sweet opportunity. I mean, you're going on the road with these guys, and you're seeing all kinds of stuff. But we know that things got tough, because pretty shortly after they left, something happened. And in Acts 13, we see this. Paul and his companions then left Paphos by ship for Pamphylia, landing at the port town of Perga. And there, John Mark left them and returned to Jerusalem. Now, again, I don't want to gossip about the guy, but I mean, we don't know. We don't know what happened, but I don't know if it was he missed his mom. So, I mean, this guy was raised with his mom. Maybe he was just like, oh, he's a mama's boy, and that's okay. Maybe he just wanted to be with mom. We don't know. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he'd gotten something. Maybe he was homesick. Maybe the whole idea of just traveling around it was intense. You know, they had spent time on the ship. Maybe there was like some crazy stuff that happened there. I don't know. We don't know what happened. But for whatever reason, he left. What we do know is that Paul felt betrayed by it. Paul saw Mark as a deserter, a defector. And he didn't forget that. He saw Mark as a quitter. He quit. Again, he didn't forget. Because later on, check this out, Acts 15, verse 36 to 39 says, after some time, Paul said to Barnabas, hey, let's go back and visit each city where we previously preached the word of the Lord to see how the new believers are doing. Barnabas agreed and wanted to take along with him John Mark. But Paul disagreed strongly, since John Mark had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in their work. Their disagreement was so sharp that they separated. Barnabas went and took John Mark with him and sailed for Cyprus. So again, Paul's like, he deserted us. Dude, he's not coming with us. Mark, he's a quitter. And we're not going to bring, I can't trust him. And think about that. That's now Mark's reputation. Like and it's written down. Like that's literally his reputation according to the Apostle Paul. Okay, I mean, I know, like, Jesus, I know you love me, but I also want Paul to like me. You know, that kind of makes sense. And so this is what Paul thinks of Mark. And I have to think, man, I wonder if Mark ever regretted that decision. Like, what, we don't know why he left, but did he regret the decision to leave them? Well, he had to live with the consequences. And so, yeah, Paul and Barnabas, they fight. They split ways over it. Again, we find out in Colossians that Barnabas and Mark were cousins. And so, they say blood is thicker than water. And so maybe Barnabas had just an easier time forgiving him. He was able to get over that hurdle. But Paul wasn't, not yet. And so from that point on, Mark literally drops off the map. We don't know what happened to him. We don't hear anything about him. We don't. Years pass, and then we see his name pop up in some of Paul's letters. Uh-oh. What's Paul doing now talking about Mark? Is he still hurt? Well, it turns out, actually, Paul has softened over time. Check this out in Colossians 4. Paul's writing this. He says, Aristarchus, who is in prison with me, sends you his greetings, and so does Mark, Barnabas' cousin. As you were instructed before, make Mark welcome if he comes your way. Jesus, the one we call Justice, he also sends his greetings. And these are the only Jewish believers among my coworkers. And they are working with me here for the kingdom of God. And what a comfort they have been. They. So it's this guy, Justice, and it includes Mark. Wow. One more verse here. 2 Timothy 4, verse 9. So Paul he's in Rome, and he's literally about to die. Like, this is the end of his life, the end of the race. And some of his final words that he wrote, he writes to Timothy. He says, Timothy, please come as soon as you can. Demas has deserted me because he loves the things of this life and has gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia. Titus has gone to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Bring Mark with you when you come, for he will be helpful to me in my ministry. Wow. Again, I don't know what happened, but what a turnaround. What a comeback. And I think that's just actually a picture of what God's grace can do. The relationships that have been severed, been wounded. I mean, the gospel of God's grace is powerful enough to bring together what we've torn apart. Mark was restored. We see that. And so that had to have been like a part of like the motivating factor of him as he's writing. He's like, the grace that he talks about throughout his gospel, he's like, I've experienced that. So let me ask you guys, ask us, I mean, have you ever made a really bad mistake? Yesterday, I was just kind of walking through, I was at breakfast, having breakfast, and I had Kellen next to me, and I was just reading this out loud, and I pretended like he was you guys. He's 3, okay, so good comparison. Just kidding. Children of God, come on. But I was like, I read this out loud, I'm like, have you ever made a really bad mistake? And he's like, and he continued to say no for the rest of these questions, but for real though, yes, like we have, right? Have you ever failed in a very public way? Have you ever quit when you should have kept going? Do you live with regrets? Have you ever made a bad decision that would impact your reputation for years? Yeah, me too. But we can take heart because what we see here is that, one guy who made a decision that he probably regretted for a long time was given the task of writing the very first gospel. That's what we have. So Mark's failure wasn't an end for him. So with all of that context, think about this. Just the fact that the Gospel of Mark was written, I mean, the biggest, I'd say the first miracle that we see is just the fact that it was written at all. Again, the good news of Jesus that Mark is going to go on to describe, that he's going to talk about, and he's going to document, this is the same Jesus, the same grace that he had experienced in his own life firsthand. So that's our guide. That's our author. That's who Mark is. And again, this was the earliest written account. So he's not borrowing from Luke and John and Matthew. He's really blazing a new trail. He's the first to really write this stuff down. And the question is, well, how did Mark know all the details? I mean, this was probably in the 80s, 50s, like where a couple decades after Jesus had risen from the dead, ascended to heaven. So how would Mark know all of the details? And so I'd say every reliable New Testament scholar agrees that Mark got all of his info from Peter. Peter was his source. So really he's documenting Peter's experience. And it makes sense too, because when if you know Peter, this guy's impulsive, all right? He's just he just says things, it's quick. He's all over the place. He's quick to speak, very impulsive guy. And when you read Mark, it moves fast. It moves really quick. You feel the pace of it. Mark's favorite word is the word immediately. Immediately. It's like one story. Immediately this happened. And then this. And immediately Jesus went there. You're going to see this word used immediately. It just moves fast. That word is used 42 times in the Gospel of Mark. When you read through Mark, you don't see a lot of parables. Where Jesus is telling a long story. There's a couple, but you don't see a lot of parables. Guys, you don't even see Jesus' birth. Mark skipped Christmas. He's just like, we don't need Christmas. Let's just go right into it. I knew that you would like that. So, the Grinch over here. No, but Mark, he emphasizes action. It's all about action. It's one thing right after the next. I think he's writing to an audience that said, okay, skip all of the symbolism, all of the things, the Old Testament, that's great stuff, but just give us the facts. Just tell us about this guy, Jesus, and let us decide what we think. And so I think Mark presents the life of Jesus as just a very straightforward manner. So why did he write it? I mean, we got to ask that question. Why? I mean, what was the purpose? And I think up until this time, all of the stories about what Jesus did, what he accomplished, everything had been passed down orally. It was just like sharing stories, right? And that was okay to do because everybody, if you had shared the story of Jesus, people were like, no. And then you'd be like, yeah, go talk to him. He was there. I mean, don't take my word for it. Talk to them. These are the eyewitnesses. And there were hundreds of people who had seen all of this stuff. So there was really no way to make stuff up about Jesus. You couldn't say, Jesus, yeah, dude, guess what? I saw him. He owned a unicorn that actually flew him from city to city. It was crazy, dude. Like, people are like, that's dumb. Like, we were there, and we don't know of any unicorn that you speak of. You couldn't make stuff up, okay? But a generation later, several decades later, as eyewitnesses to the life of Jesus, they're dying off. And all of a sudden, now there's this danger that you could actually start to talk about things that Jesus did that he did not do. You could leave out important details. People could decide to make up a Jesus of their own. And then over time, they can make up little things here and there, and over time lose touch with the real Jesus. So there needed to be a written account. And so Mark, he starts to pull together the stories, starts to capture them, talking with Peter. He writes them down so that we would be handed a reliable account of the real Jesus. That's what we have. Not a made-up, distorted, homemade version of Jesus, of your own imagination to serve your own purposes, but the real Jesus and what he said and what he did according to the people that were there. And I think we need this today. There's a lot of confusion in the church, outside the church, as to who the real Jesus is. There's a lot of competing narratives. There's a lot of confusion. Was he just a moral teacher? He was a political revolutionary. We're just going to use Jesus as a political piece. He's just a good role model, but he's distant, he's uninvolved, he wasn't fully man, or he's not fully God, or he's fully this, but not fully that. I mean, there's just a lot of ways that the person of Jesus can be distorted, and we lose him. So I think this is important. Belief, what we believe, will dictate how we live. Belief shapes behavior. And what we believe about Jesus will actually influence the way that we live our lives. It will influence our actions, our attitudes, the decisions that we make. So this is not just something theoretical and for a scholarly conversation of sorts. This is like actually real stuff. It's real Jesus for real life. And again, if we don't know the real Jesus, slowly but surely the Jesus, the Savior, the rescuer, gets watered down, and we lose that, and we just have a role model, someone to follow and to live, like do what he did, but we don't know what he accomplished. I mean, now we're just left on our own. We need the real Jesus. We can't do this on our own. We need the real Jesus, the one who came to save and to rescue. And so the real Jesus, that is who Mark shines the spotlight on all throughout. And so what we're going to see in the weeks to come throughout the Gospel of Mark, he will describe Jesus with two titles. So who is the real Jesus? He primarily uses two different titles. One is Jesus is the Son of God, and he's the Son of Man. And I want to talk a little bit about each of those today. And these titles are important because each of them capture something incredibly vital about the nature of who Jesus is, the real Jesus. And everything that we're going to see Jesus say, everything that we're going to see him do throughout the Gospel of Mark is flowing out of this identity as the Son of God and the Son of Man. So first of all, Son of God. It's a fairly common title. It's used throughout Scripture. Here in Mark, how he uses it, it's simply put, this title emphasizes Jesus' divine authority. And Mark, he wastes no time. Again, he skipped Christmas. He wastes no time. Mark 1:1, he says, this is the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. He's the Son of God. He's the rescuer that God had promised to send. It turns out that the rescuer is God himself. Mark saw Jesus as the Son of God who possessed all divine authority. All divine authority. And we're going to see this divine power, this authority right away. Immediately, right away. Check this out. Right away in chapter 1 alone, he's driving out evil spirits. He's healing the sick. And in chapter 4, he's calming the storm. He's raising the dead to life. He's feeding thousands of people with scraps. He's walking on water. And the ultimate demonstration of his divine authority in chapter 16 is he's rising from the dead. From start to finish, we're seeing the divine authority, the power that Jesus has as the Son of God. And we're going to see that title show up in some very significant points throughout the gospel, and sometimes out of the mouths of some pretty interesting personalities. Perhaps one of the most striking things is that the disciples very rarely even get it, that Jesus is the Son of God. However, the demons, they get it right away. And Jesus tells them, don't you say anything. We're going to get to that. But the demons get it. They see it. Even a Roman centurion who's helping crucify Jesus, he gets it in chapter 15. It's not till after the resurrection did the disciples finally get it. So I don't know about you guys, that gives me hope. There's hope. If Jesus' disciples failed to see it, there's hope for those who seem farthest away. And even those of us in this room, there's hope for us that Jesus is revealing to us who he is as the Son of God. So, Son of God, it emphasizes his divine authority. Mark also identifies him as the Son of Man. And this title emphasizes Jesus' willingness to experience humanity for our sake. So if the Son of God, if that speaks to his power, the Son of Man, it speaks to his presence. He's here. He's among us, experiencing life here in this broken world. He doesn't just become human, he takes the posture of a servant to other humans. Mark 10:45, this is the theme verse. If you're looking for a theme verse of Mark 10:45 is that, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. And that's what this gospel highlights, is Jesus coming to experience life in this broken world for us. And he's not just a servant, he's the Son of Man he's the suffering servant. In Mark 8, it says, Jesus began to tell them, his disciples, that the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of the religious law. He would be killed, but 3 days later he would rise from the dead. So what this means, friends, the Son of Man, is that we have God with us. God in a bod. It means we have a God who knows what it means to suffer. We have a God who came into this broken world and decided to play by the rules. He gets it. He's not just the Son of God, he's the Son of Man. He gets it. He came to suffer with us, and he came to suffer for us. So the real Jesus, friends, is a suffering servant. And I gotta say, no other religion will offer you a God who knows what it means to suffer. That's ludicrous to think about. The divine king of the universe becoming a servant. Like, that's, no other religion makes that audacious claim. Every other religion will give you a ladder to climb, a checklist to complete, things that you got to do in order to save yourself. That actually makes sense to our human mindset, right? But the real Jesus doesn't give you a ladder. He goes to a cross. He's not at the top of a ladder shouting, "Come on, get your act together, climb faster, get up here, come on." No. He's not shouting from the top of a ladder. He's declaring from the cross, "It is finished." The real Jesus, he came as a suffering servant, and through his sacrifice, we're saved. So Son of God, Son of Man, I mean, let's think about what this actually means for you and me. I mean, first, like the Son of God, he has divine authority. Jesus, the real Jesus, has all authority. It means a lot of things, but I'll just name a few things. It means that we don't have to search, we don't have to seek, we don't have to shop for that thing that will give us the power to control our life. We don't have to look for some other power, some other thing. In the world that we live in, we're surrounded by a catalog of thousands of other substitute saviors, all of which might give us a little hit here and there, a sense of control, a sense of peace, but end up failing us. His authority, it means that we can stop hunting for that elusive thing, that thing that we believe if we had it would make our life complete, that would give us safety. So whatever you're facing, Jesus has the authority over it. Again, this is the real Jesus for real life. And you and I, we experience life in a real life. We experience things in real life. Think about the way, what the kind of stuff that we experience with anxiety and worry. I mean, this desire to control our environment, to control an outcome, to control people, and the feeling of being out of control, it gives us anxiety. We start to worry. Man, let the divine authority of Jesus speak into that. Lean into him there. Health challenges. I mean, think about financial struggles, relationship conflicts, decision making. Oh, what are we gonna do? What the future? It's like, man, that's it. Let the real Jesus handle that. He has all divine authority over your future. So again, knowing and trusting Jesus, the Son of God, and knowing that he has all authority, that will help us navigate daily life with confidence, with hope, with peace. So do you know the real Jesus? He's also the Son of Man. Again, he knows what it means to suffer. Whatever it is you're facing, and I got to think in this room, we are facing a lot of different things. He's been there. And you and I, we know this to be true. When we are in the midst of suffering, the last thing that we tend to need is advice. What we do need, and what often helps, is somebody who gets it. I've been there. They understand. We don't need advice. Here's how you get out of that. No, we need to know someone who gets it, who can comfort us in that way. Think about the emotional pain that we experience, the grief, the loneliness, heartbreak. Jesus has been there. He's no stranger to sorrow. He's no stranger to suffering. He gets it. Temptation, yeah, he gets it. Rejection, betrayal. I got to think Jesus, if anyone knows the sting of betrayal, of rejection, and he stands with you. He stands with you in your hurt. Physical suffering, he knows what it means to be in agony. Stress and overwhelmed, all of these things. In all these situations, Jesus, his empathy and his understanding, it provides us a source of strength and comfort. He's the Son of Man. He gets it. And finally, I'll close with this, is that when we look at Mark's gospel, this is true of all the gospels. If you're going to zoom out, kind of just get the bird's eye view of the whole thing and to see it. We've got 1/4 of his gospel, right? A fourth of it is dedicated to one single week. The rest of Jesus' ministry, the 3 years of his ministry happened chapters 1 through 10, and then from 11 to 16 is 1 week. And that's on purpose. It's been said that the Gospels are more concerned about Christ, his death, than his life. His life is important, but the crux of it, the point of it is what happened, his death. That week is known as the Passion, right? And one scholar says this, is that Mark is a passion narrative with an extended introduction. I like that. Because this whole thing, the Son of God, the Son of Man, it culminates as it's Christ on the cross, dying for us, dying as us. We were in him, crucified. The whole thing points to Jesus and his rescue. So Mark 10:45, that the theme verse of Mark, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and give his life as a ransom for many. Let me ask, have you let him serve you? Have you let him serve you? That's what he came to do. Or maybe you're like me, spent most of your life trying to do stuff for him, trying to please him, trying to just keep your life clean and together and put on a happy face and try to serve God. It took me a while to figure out I needed to be served by him. I know it sounds like, can we say that in church? Like, Jesus served me. He came to serve, to give his life as a ransom. The question is, have you let him? Remember the story? I don't think this one's actually in Mark. I could be wrong. Where Peter, Jesus is washing the disciples' feet, and Peter's like, don't clean me, don't do that. And Jesus is like, well, unless I clean you, you can't have anything to do with me. Oh, clean all of me. Like, many of us are sitting there, don't clean me. I can't, no, not you. You're too good. No, he came to clean you. Let's let him do his job. What I'm saying is, let's be receivers. Let's let him serve us. So he's come to serve. He's come to do things for us. He's come to forgive us. He's come to do things to us, to change us from the inside out. And he wants to live his life through us. So may you experience the real Jesus as the Son of God, the Son of Man, your Savior, your rescuer. May you experience the real Jesus as we make our way through the Gospel of Mark. Let's pray.